So many people here are ex-Conservatives.
Are they? Yeah. No wonder Nadine said she feels at home. She said she feels at home.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Everyone's attention. I've got you all now. Man on the front row. Good lad. Good lad. Welcome here. Welcome. Can everyone hear? Has everyone got a drink? We ran out of drinks. It wouldn't be Reform Party conference if we still had drinks in the corner, but we've got some more, so don't you worry. Cheers. Cheers. Very cheers. Welcome to what we think is the most important Fringe event going. We are the Centre for Social Justice. We've been in operation for about 20 years, trying to look at the root causes of poverty and some of the big issues that, frankly, Westminster doesn't talk about. And that's why we're here tonight to talk about one of the big ones, and that's men and boys. About a year ago, we had a number of our charities coming to us saying, why does no one talk about men and boys and what's going on with young lads in our communities, in our estates? Why is there always women and girls strategies? I've not been owning those. I've got 3 daughters myself. I'll get killed if I did. But there's nothing for the lads. And so we're going to talk about why that might be. We're going to talk about top issues, and we're going to talk about top reflections. We have got an all-star panel to do that tonight. An all-star. I'm not going to lie, we do have. We're waiting for Lee Anderson, the ultimate lost boy. I've just had intel. He's at the pub having his tea. So if we can cheer him when he comes in, please, that would be great. That'd be great news for us all. I want to introduce our panel. First of all, we have Tim Montgomerie, who is actually a founder of the Centre for Social Justice many, many years ago. He's a founder. Use your mic, please, Tim. Use your mic. He's a founder of Con Home, of Unheard. He's one of the great doers in Westminster. And he moved over to Reform in dramatic fashion. If you want to Google what outfit he was wearing on that day, please do, because it's the worst outfit known to man. And Nigel did actually say to him, you need to up your dressing stakes. So I'm pleased that you're wearing a suit tonight, Tim. We have Miriam Cates here tonight, who's author of this report and senior fellow of the CSJ. Miriam, you might have some news for everyone tonight. About defection? No, come on. Too early, I went too early. She may have joined the Labour Party, she backed Angela Rayner. But anyway, we'll go on to that another point. But it's great to have Miriam here with us tonight, who wrote this report, who's a superstar in Westminster, and we're very proud to work with her. We, of course, have Isabelle Oakeshott, one of our greatest friends over the last years, breaker of the big stories, challenger of all things. And actually, last time I did one of these panels with Isabel, we were here with Rory Stewart, the prisons minister then. Do you remember this? Do you remember this one?
I do, yeah.
And me and Isabel had just been round Leeds prison looking at all stuff. And Rory was there, giving it the big one like he always does. And Isabel said, do you know what, I've just come from Leeds prison. I think prison time is too easy. Oh, well, Rory nearly fell off his chair on that one. So we're going to have more from her tonight. And of course we have George, the absolute darling of the party, here tonight, the ultimate in this way. He's got a £2 billion budget at his fingertips. George, honestly, so proud. Isabel would say we've got children who are not doing anything that you're doing. It's very proud to have you with us. But you will need that £2 billion budget if you go on a night out in Leamington Spa, part of your constituency. Because blooming out, you need to get those drinks prices down. Okay, I'll stop talking. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to invite the research director of the CSJ up, Ed Davies, and he's going to thoroughly depress you all for about 3 minutes. I give you the state of play on boys and men in this country. He's going to do some slides. He'll give you the top stats. The panel are going to respond, and then I'm going to go over to you for questions. Does that sound fair? We'll do that. Right, Ed, where are you? Here he is. Look at him. He looks all negative in the way he dresses. Come on, Ed. Give it to us.
I feel like this is an HR complaint happening here. Good evening. Thank you. You don't get that at the Lib Dems. Okay. It's 6:30 on a Friday night, so I've got 7 slides of statistics for you, which is just what you want. But look, Andy's introduced this. We've been doing this work. I just want to tee this up by telling you what we found. We've done loads of focus groups. We've interviewed 3,000 people. We've done about 30 visits around the UK. Since then, we've met another 100 organisations. We've looked at hundreds of government data sets. And what we found is basically pretty depressing, and I'm going to run through it. First thing, employment. Okay, this probably won't be a surprise to a lot of you. When we launched this report, the thing the press led on is the inversion of the gender pay gap. So if you're under 30, you'll probably earn about 10% less as a man than a woman now. In some ways, that doesn't bother me. Someone will learn more than another. What does bother me is why. If you look at what is going on in male employment right now, you're more likely to be unemployed, you're more likely to be economically inactive. If you're aged 16 to 24, you're more likely not to be in education, employment or training. And just in the last few years, in boys, that has risen by 40%. It's risen in girls too by 7%, but in boys it's risen by 40%. It's not a good look. Asking why? Possibly education. If you are a boy now, you will start behind the girls on the first day. You will do worse at SATs, GCSEs, A-levels, T-levels. People thought we do vocational, boys will do better at that. No, they do worse than the girls. They're less likely to go to university and they will get a worse degree at university. I don't know if you can see it, but the one number on there, school readiness, is a big one. The government has targeted 75% of kids to be school ready, okay? That means can go to the toilet, can tie their shoelaces, use a knife and fork. Not maths and English basics. Girls are there. They're already hitting the government target, but boys are at 60%. Health. It's pretty well known now, suicide is the biggest killer of men under 50. It's 3.5 times more likely if you're a man. That chart, you won't be able to read it. The red lines are men, the grey lines are women. In every single year of life, you are 3 or more times, basically, likely to kill yourself as a man than a woman. The one other stat I'm going to draw attention to, 95% of steroid users are men. We don't know how many young men are using steroids, but we think it could be as many as around 1 million. There is very little research on this, but there is something going on there that we need to be aware of. You depressed yet? Let's make this interactive then, okay? 2.5 million children growing up without a father figure at home. Hands up here if you were born in the 1950s. Yes. Okay, you are the winners. If you were born in 1958, by the time you sat your... we've got an actual 1958 here. By the time you sat your O-levels, age 16, you had a 90% chance that you were living with your mum and dad. 1970s, who are the winners in the room? Yes. 1978 here. If you were born in 1970, in that 12-year period, it dropped from 9 in 10 to 8 in 10. Who was born this century? We've got one. We've got a few. That's one for the campaigners to look at. Not many born this century here. If you were born this century, by the time you sat your GCSEs, it was 50-50 that you would be living with your mum and dad. The way that family life has changed in the UK over the last 50 years, it is unrecognisable. When we talk about family stuff, we need to be aware that the generation coming up now have a totally different experience from us. Crime, I'll rattle through this one. We hear a lot, Andy mentioned there, we have violence against women and girls, we have a women's crime strategy. 90% of crime, violent crime, is male against male. Crime is a predominantly male problem. Most of the prison estate is full of men. And lastly, tech and porn. It's difficult to talk about, but it massively matters. There is something going on online. We've all heard of the Andrew Tates of this world. But thinking about how porn is influencing relationships between men and women is now massive. If you are over 50 here, as some of you have said you are, you have a 3% chance of having been choked during sex. If you are under 30, you have 10 times that chance. About a third of under 30s have experienced this now. There is something very corrosive going on with young people in pornography at the moment. Are we depressed enough?
Hello. Ed is available for kids' parties, for bar mitzvahs. So do book him. It's a strong fee, especially on that last start, Ed. Bloody heck. Right. Okay. So we've heard it's basically a terrible picture, right? We're going to get some reflections from our expert panel. And I was in the bar earlier with Tim, and he said, please, can I go first? So, Tim, over to you.
Fellow reformers. And can I begin by saying I've been a member of Reform now for about 8 months, and I finally feel at home in my political life. And I thank you so much for the warm welcome I've had from so many of you. I'm going to be really naughty because I'm going to go over to the Reform bus in about 50 minutes because I'm talking about Sky and the demise of Angela Rayner. Will you forgive me for doing that? But what I first of all want to say before I disappear to Andy's anger is talk about why I think this issue of so many issues is absolutely central to the Reform agenda. What does reform stand for more than anything else in your minds? In my, what do you say? Family, well certainly, yeah. And of course the party's slogan is family, community and flag. Family, nation and flag. And it matters so much. And we just had some statistics shared to us from Ed about the fact that so many children now grow up without two parents in their lives. Now we all know where there are plenty of families where actually that is not a bad thing. If there is abuse or violence in a relationship, you don't want that mother or father anywhere near the child. But generally, what men need, particularly when they're growing up, what boys need, is they need a father role model. And so many of them don't have that anymore. They grow up in families whereby they don't see a father arguing with their mother, but reconciling. You know, we all argue, we all have our differences. What matters is, do we reconcile? Do we learn to be better people? And I was so pleased earlier this year when Nigel Farage committed this party to recognise marriage and family properly in the tax system. You know what the greatest love in humanity is? It's not reciprocated. It's the love of a parent for their child. What a parent will do for their child is the most extraordinary love of all. And of course, children then fly the nest and they don't love their parents in the same way back. And I think part of the reason why we're offended when families are broken is because we know it's not how it's meant to be. When children grow up in a life without a parent in their corner, we know that that's the natural order turned upside down in a pernicious and damaging way. So finally, in reform, we have a party that recognises that. And look, Nigel Farage has himself said, he hasn't led the perfect life. Who amongst us has? Anyone want to put their hands up? Someone in the front. What matters is not whether we've led the perfect life, but whether we recognise that again and again, marriage and the family is the ideal environment, and we need to promote it. And a final thought before I shut up or Andy presses the trap door and I disappear. is
5 seconds.
Who also amongst this is absolutely fed up with the way television adverts represent men? Men are always the stupid ones in the advert. They always say the ridiculous things. And as we've just seen from the statistics that have been shared by us by Ed, men have now fallen behind in so many indicators. There's no... Hey!
Thanks for joining us.
Lee arrived just at the moment I said you've fallen behind in all the indicators. Has your shirt been ironed by Sarah, Lee?
Far too long.
Anyway, I should shut up at this point, but just to say, it's not just about changing government. I mentioned that advertising thing just in brief, because there are a lot of people, actors in the cultural sphere, who are corrosive about the status of men in society. And as consumers, we have to fight back. We have to say we're fed up with being ridiculed. We're fed up being painted as second-class citizens. Enough is enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Miriam, we're going to go to you. You're a broadcaster. Do you ridicule men? I know you don't. You love men. Right, come on. Let's hear from you.
Thanks, Tim, and I'll try not to repeat everything you said, but it was fantastic. I think if we just think back a few decades or even a few centuries, societies, Western civilization tended to see its young men as its greatest resource. Those who were able to fight a war if necessary, those who had the energy to innovate, to protect, to raise the next generation. And now our attitude to young men has completely changed. We see them as a liability. For the first time ever, parents who are pregnant, surveys say that they'd prefer to have a girl, whereas, of course, throughout history it's been the opposite. Now, of course, we don't want to undo any of the great advantages that women have today that we didn't have in the past. I've certainly benefited from them. But it is a terrible thing when society's greatest resource becomes a liability. And that's certainly what we're seeing now amongst many, but not, of course, all young men. And I think the two things that this report have highlighted that have changed so much for men and boys in the last few decades are, firstly, the thing that Tim was talking about, the incredible rise in fatherlessness, but also the way that technology has transformed all childhood, but particularly boyhood. I don't want to dwell on the fatherlessness because that's already been spoken about, but I think it's really important to ask, why have we seen such a rise in fatherlessness? And it isn't amongst all children, it's particularly amongst poor children in white communities. And there's one simple reason for that: it is marriage. 75% of marriages stay together, they last, the children grow up with two parents. If your parents are cohabiting when you're born, there's only a 30% chance that that relationship will survive. And if you reach the age of 12 and your parents are still together, there's around a 90% chance that they're married. That's how significant marriage is. It's easy to romanticize it and think about it's about Hollywood and white dresses, but it's not. It has this incredible social, legal, protective effect on children. And the problem is that rich people, educated people, politicians, even though they say marriage isn't important, families come in all shapes and sizes, they have continued to get married because they know it works. 85% of the top income decile continue to get married. In the poorest communities, if your parents are poor when you're born, there's just a 19% chance that they're married. And so we look at all these statistics about why are poor white boys falling behind at school. It all comes down to this one thing: they don't have dads. Why are dads so important? Well, I think it's obvious in the teenage years, but in our research we found that they're really important in the early years too, because just that male presence, that support to mum in the house when you're doing the ordinary things like potty training, like discipline. I'm a mum, I know how easy it is to give in to my children. That's just naturally part of being a mum. Not all women, of course, but that's a kind of natural biological thing, to care for children in that intimate way. And male presence really helps with laying boundaries and helping children to learn self-discipline. This was obvious to our ancestors just a few generations ago. It needs to be made obvious again. But then the other aspect of childhood, boyhood, that's changed so much is technology. And I know we talk about Andrew Tate. I don't think he's a particularly nice guy, but I actually don't think he's the problem. I think the problem is pornography. And in the past, the way that boys learned about how they should treat women and girls in romantic and sexual relationships came from perhaps their peers, their parents, other people around them, maybe the odd top shelf magazine, it's true. But internet pornography is something entirely different. It's almost totally violent. It almost always involves violence towards women. They are often videos of real rapes and real abuse of children that are being trafficked across the world. And yet for so many of our boys, that is their first sexual experience. The average age of coming across violent online pornography is now 12. Most of that pornography is seen on Twitter, not on porn sites. And now we're seeing this real change in the way that boys view girls. And consequently, we found in our research that over 70% of girls think that young men are pretty scary. And when we've heard that statistic about how many girls are now choked in a sexual experience, it's unsurprising. So porn is not just a problem for women, it's a serious problem for men. It's affecting how boys and girls relate to each other. We now have this horrendous statistic where 50% of the sexual abuse of children is carried out by other children. What a change in just a generation. So I think the really important question we have to ask is, how do we reverse these things? How do we reverse the decline of marriage? How do we protect our children from the ravages of internet pornography? And of course, free speech is really, really important. But pornography is not free speech. It's actually the opposite of freedom for both men and women. So these are the questions. Thank you. So these are the questions that we have to answer. How do we make sure that more boys grow up without dads and that their guide, their imprint for masculinity comes from their fathers, comes from good men around them, rather than what they're finding online. That's what we're hoping to answer with the Lost Boys. The next part of our report is going to be looking at the early years, how we make things better for boys even before they start school, but we'll then be moving through the age groups, through boys in their early teens, right up to adolescence, and looking at employment and boys' prospects for the rest of their lives. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Miriam. Isabel. Tim's gone. Could we boo him as he walks off? Play boo, boo. Good luck, Tim.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Miriam, for all your amazing work on this really important subject. Has anyone noticed how many young men there are here at the Reform Party conference? It's a lot, and thank you to all of those that have turned up. And I think that says something about how young men are yearning for something different. They recognise their generation has a problem, and it's really heartening to see a new generation of boys being attracted to getting into politics. And I'm very invested in this subject because I have a teenage boy myself. It's so important. When I was looking into this issue of the disparity in attainment between boys and girls, I noticed that Bridget Phillipson, in my view, probably the worst education secretary I have ever encountered in 20 years of political reporting, had the absolute temerity to describe that attainment gap as a disgrace, as if her own government and the measures that her government has taken haven't contributed massively to fueling that problem. I mean, for a start, how does it set the tone if you make it your ideological mission to shut down private schools where attainment is higher because parents, by and large, are making every sacrifice possible to give their children the best education? So what a cheek, I thought, that she said that. And so much of what this government is doing is contributing to the problem. And I think we need to, when we're looking at the issues here and searching for solutions, we have to look at the way the entire education system is infected with left-leaning wokery. It is appalling. At so much of the heart of this problem is the identity crisis for young men. And no wonder if they are being confused from a very young age as to whether or not they're boys. I mean, this is at the foundation of it, isn't it? You know, if you're being told by your own teachers at a young age that you might not actually be a boy, it doesn't really help set you on the right path. And this is absolutely rife in our education system at every level. It starts really early. And you only have to look at the battles that have been fought by that incredible educational pioneer, Catherine Birbal Singh, in her amazing school. You know, what she has come up against from the education establishment shows you just what a challenge we have. I have taken it to an absolute extreme in my bids to get away from all of this. It's well known I live now in the United Arab Emirates, and one of the main reasons I went there was for the British education. What an irony that I have taken my children to the Middle East to get a fine British education in a school, a British school, which actually I wouldn't dream of sending them to here in the UK, Brighton College, very lefty in the UK. But where we are, the rainbow flag is actually illegal. And I think that is no bad thing in educational settings. Boys are boys, girls are girls, and everybody is pretty clear about that. So I feel really strongly about that aspect of it. And I also agree, of course, that marriage is at the foundation of all of this and the importance of male role models. But I want to add to that it's really important that we also send out the message that if your marriage fails, and so many of us in this room have probably been there, myself included, that doesn't mean that your children should be doomed to failure or low attainment. But what you as a single parent, what I've been, must do is find substitute or replacement male role models. And just because your marriage is broken up doesn't also mean that whoever is the father can't still be a fantastic role model. So this is a balance, isn't it? Because of course we want to aspire to marriage as the foundation of everything, but not all of us are brilliant at making that work. And sometimes it doesn't work out, and we can still give our sons the best possible role models. So that's all I have to say on that tonight, but I'm so interested to hear what I think our next speaker's going to say, because even at his young age, he is already an incredible role model. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. George, time for you. George's teeth are incredible as well, by the way. Can I just add that? I just want to say that. I was feeling it all night.
Thank you. So just before I kind of get into why I think this is a big issue for not just people here today, but across this country, I just wanted to give a bit of background on why I'm here. Now, I'm the youngest member of the panel, maybe one of the youngest here today. The education system is broken. I'm probably one of the closest to being in school and being in sixth forms and universities. It's a joke. It's a complete joke. Sixth forms, you're meant to develop your learning from GCSEs. You don't develop anything. The only thing you do develop is a woke mindset. You're not allowed to question what's going on. You're not allowed to question the way you think. You're just told to think a certain way. So in our politics classes, it was why, I always asked, it was very simple. Why so accepting? Why are we so accepting of the things that are happening? There's a school in Bedworth, in a town where I live. At age 6 to 7 years old, you get taught to question why you are a boy and what would you like to be if you were the other gender. That happens. But the reason why I came to Reform was because I felt lost in the Conservative Party and that they didn't stand up for young people in schools and universities. And Lee Anderson came down to Nuneaton just before the general election, and I stood up and asked him, what is Reform going to do about this wave of wokeism that's washing across our education establishments? And Reform's policy on that, it opened my eyes. So I joined the next day, and then I gradually built through, and then become a councillor, then council leader. But I think the problem that starts with young lads is small towns like Bedworth and Nuneaton in my patch. There's a brain drain when it comes to 16. They leave to go to college, and there's no proper education. It's algebra, science, that way of thinking. We need hands-on work experience and apprenticeships. My dad was a carpenter, and just that practicality of being there every day. He'd run his own business, but then he'd become ill. He had sepsis, so he had to stay at home and look after the kids. It's kind of roles reversed in the sense, my mum went to work as a teaching assistant and my dad stayed at home looking after us. And I think that's different. And when talking to people at school about it, well, that's a bit odd. Why is your dad at home? Shouldn't he be working? And well, hang on a second. I've actually learnt more of hearing what he's been doing in the construction business than I ever would. And that's because they don't teach it at schools. Engineering classes are decreasing. Design and technology, decreasing. Young lads that are predominantly, a lot of them that do want to get into the construction, hands-on work, have got ADHD or autism. And they don't get that support. They get thrown into a classroom where they've got no resources to expand their minds. And that's where what we want to do in Warwickshire County Council is a youth employment and skills programme. And this allows especially young lads, into accessing private industry, apprenticeships and work experience. But what I want to look at doing is allowing them to work hands-on in the construction industry to actually benefit the council. Because if we're going to train them up through apprenticeships and work experience, then we can use them to repair the houses and do the maintenance. Is that not a better deal? And they get the apprenticeships, the work experience, they get paid, hands-on support. That's the way it needs to be. For too long, we've taken this coercive curriculum, this communist conveyor belt of universities, and that's the problem. I went to uni. I weren't there for long because it was really depressing to be in. There was a lecture going on about physics, and they were learning about intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I think, fine, we want to learn about how jets go and so on. Free Palestine showed up, blockaded the lecturers from going out, and sprayed the walls and so on because they're saying, you're supplying Israel with weapons. They're like, no, you're not, you're learning. And then they come into the politics lecture, and the lecturer said, oh no, we need to write to the Chancellor and the Dean of Leicester University and say they need to not be arrested because they spray painted the doors and so on, caused criminal damage. And this is the problem with our education system. It's bred into the lecturers that are there at universities to think a certain way. You're meant to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought. When you get to these universities, it's a different game. It is a dog-eats-dog world in universities, and what you have to do is, if you want, unfortunately, the way it is now, if you want to succeed, you have to keep your head down and be quiet and not say anything. But that's where I was a bit different. I did say I was a Reform member, didn't make many friends. It was Leicester, but it is changing. The world's changing, and this is what I think is really important for Reform to take on. We have to start looking at apprenticeship schemes, work experience, hands-on work, not just algebra. I went to a horsing development centre in Galley Common in Nuneaton, and they said to me, we do algebra, but we teach kids how many carrots to feed the horses. I know I'm digressing a bit, but this is the point. Is that they're teaching kids how to do algebra with actual hands-on stuff. You don't need to sit in a classroom. And this affects young lads more than it does girls. So if we can start getting the hands-on work there, it changes it. And if they have a male role model, it's honestly, having a dad at home, always, it changed the way you think, that the debates, the arguing, the father and son duo, it works. And for too long it's been promoted, no, the mums are the main ones that care for the kids. My dad was there every day, and it changes the way you think, it changes your future, and that's what we need to start looking at, is actually the placement of males in the household. And I've seen, as children and families portfolio holder, that especially in hospitals, when the mum gives birth, they take the dad out and they ask the mum, have you been domestically abused? Instantly, the dad questions, what have I done? Because the wife will tell him. And he instantly starts to think, oh, are they thinking something different? And the social services gets weaponised by the education system and the health system when stern dads that express their emotions in different ways, they maybe not cry, but they get assertive, especially when they're trying to get the best care for their children. And yes, I have seen many applications to social services and child protections because dads are just being dads. And that's where we have to start changing the tune. And that's why in Warwickshire County Council, I'm actually making a common sense approach to child services referrals, not just an open door strategy where it's always a bit assertive, gut feeling, he's a bit difficult, let's send him on his way and put him through the system. We have to start caring for the dads. That's most important, because that's what makes young lads actually strive, is having a strong male role model. And you see it a lot now. It is, do you know what? Now going through schools, and I have been back since I've been council leader, and it's just speaking to young lads. That is what they're crying out for. And it's such a shame seeing these statistics, like, are Labour not going to catch on and start doing it? But they won't. it'll take till we're in government, then we can start changing stuff. But, you know, that's the whole point of this is why we're here today, to actually start promoting male role models. And, you know, as Isabel said, you know, me being the youngest council leader actually shows that young people can do it too, and they're not just sat on their phones, you know, doing stuff in their bedrooms, you know, colouring. They can do stuff, and that's what we're doing as a party, is promoting that, and it's doing a really good job. But I will talk for England, so I'll sit back down now.
Thank you, Jules. Brilliant. Thank you, Jules. Particularly on the apprenticeship. The average age of a bricklayer in this country now is 52. I'll just leave that with you. We brought that out in our report. Speaking of bricklayers, no, stop joking. Come on, Lee, that's a joke. That's for free. That's for free. Over to you, Lee.
Hello, everybody. My dad was a coal miner. He wasn't a tool maker, he was a coal miner. And like many people in the village I was born in and raised, lots of men worked down the pits. And some of you might have seen my speech earlier, I did touch on this slightly. We had role models in our family, and I always believed that, especially young men, they normally, their life is guided, their career, and we're products of the area that we was born in. So, for example, if you'd been born in Nottinghamshire or Derbyshire, where I'm from, you'd have probably ended up down the pits. If you'd have been born in a place like Sheffield, you'd have probably ended up a steel worker. If you'd been born in Grimsby, you'd have been a fisherman. And if you'd been born in Liverpool, you'd have probably been a docker or something like that. So that's just how it was. And when I was going to school, back in the 70s and 80s, I would walk past the local coal mine. And I sort of knew that was my direction of travel when I left school. My sisters would walk past the local factory where my mother worked. And then just a few years later, my sisters was working in the local factory with my mother, and I was working down the pit with my dad. And it was simple as that. And young boys knew where they were going. It wasn't much of an aspiration to work down a coal mine, but nevertheless, they knew they got to go to work, they got to put a shift in, their family wouldn't tolerate it if they didn't go to work. They listened to their dad's alarm clock go off, they listened to their parents talk about their day at work every single night, and it was there, it was in your head, subconsciously, you knew what you had to do. But unfortunately, we have maybe second generation now of young people, especially boys, have not seen a dad in the house. They've not had a role model in the house, and when they get to 16 or 18 or whenever they leave school, they are genuinely scared, they're bothered, they're frit, they don't know what to do, they don't know what it's like to get up in the morning, they don't know what it's like to listen to an alarm clock go off, they don't know what it's like to get a pay packet at the end of the month, they've never seen that. So I don't blame the young people. We've created a society now where a generation of people have stopped at home, been on benefits, just about managed, and they've not passed any skills or any knowledge or anything onto their children, onto their sons and daughters. And I used to, before I got into politics, I spent a little bit of time working in a homeless hostel. I worked in 3 homeless hostels for young kids. They were between 16 and 18, and there were girls and boys. And it was our job to take them from the care system at 16. They'd come from either foster care or they'd come from a children's care home or somewhere. And it was our job really to turn their lives around. But we failed. We failed miserably. And we in the last hostel I worked at, there was 32 rooms, and they'd have 16 girls and 16 boys, all in their own little flats, got a little kitchen, they got their own bathroom, ensuite, everything. And guess what they were doing every night? They were buying the 10 bags, the weed, they were all sleeping with each other. And within 2 years, every single girl that left that I can remember was pregnant. They was pregnant because they knew they'd get social housing. I don't blame the girls, the state had let them down. And the boys that had left, they'd been doing the 10 bags or whatever, selling a bit of weed to make a bit of money. And I don't blame them for that at all, because they had nothing, they had no role models in their life, they was trying to make a few quid. And half of them ended up in prison. And I got to know a young lad called Ben. And I'm going to be honest, when I first started working at this hostel, I detested this young man. He was one of them, he was out on the rob, out thieving, up to all sorts of mischief. and pinching bikes. And, you know, I thought to myself, I've got to get to know this young man. I've got to know his story. So I spent quite a bit of time with young Ben. And it turned out that he'd been put in care when he was about 3 or 4. His parents had abandoned him. So he'd been put in the care system, lots of foster parents, lots of care homes, been pushed from pillar to post. His mother then died, his natural mother. And then he reconnected with his dad when his dad was, he'd be about 12 when he reconnected with his dad. But his dad was an alcoholic. He was absolute alcoholic. And he went to live with his dad for a few months. And then his dad died. And he watched his dad die in hospital of the drink. And then he's back into care. And he's back into being pushed from pillar to post, from one care home to another. And then at 16, he's in our hostel. And he's a nuisance. He's a proper nuisance, bless him. And I think to myself, you know, when he told me this story, I filled up. And I thought to myself, there's no wonder this young man is like he is. He's had no love. He's had no care. He's been pushed from pillar to post. He's had no role models. And you know what? Talking about boys and girls, it would have been cheaper for the state to take these kids at 3 and 4 year old when they first got pushed into care. It would have been cheaper to put them in private education at a boarding school, give them a good education, send them to uni or give them an apprenticeship or whatever they want to do, and then we'd have broke the poverty cycle, because a lot of these people, not all of them, but a lot of them would have gone on to get good jobs, good careers, and not spend a life in and out of prison or having 4 or 5 children with 4 or 5 different men. We genuinely lost these people, and I feel as a society, you know, young people are our assets, they're our future, they're the ones we're going to rely on, and we are wasting them every single day. And I believe something that Boris Johnson once said, and I don't say that very often, and he once said, and it's true, and I've always said it, that talent in this country is spread evenly. It really is. On every single street there's a doctor, there's a lawyer, there's an airline pilot, there's a teacher, there's a nurse. Every single street in the country has got loads of talent, but we don't see this talent. You know, a lot of it goes wasted. And how is it that we can have like a football team, like a Man United or an Aston Villa? They could spot talent at 5-year-old. They could take that kid. It could be cricket, it could be rugby, it could be swimming, it could be anything. They could take that kid at 5-year-old and take them through the academy and get the very best out of them, spend time, invest time. And, you know, 20 years later, they could be playing for England. Now, they don't all become great footballers, but they become good footballers because they've been spotted early on. Why can't we do that with these young people? Spot that they might be good at something. They might be good. A young man might be good with his hands. He might want to mess about with motors, or, you know, he might want to strip cars or something like that. So it's there. The talent is there. But we're very, very poor at spotting talent because we had this obsession under the Labour government, which was in for 30 years, of sending people to university. Now, I've got a mate called Darren, and when we was at school, he never went. From about 12 to 13, he messed about, didn't go to school, wasn't very literate, he used to be wagging it all the time, and we'd find him on the local farm. He'd be on the local farm, he'd be baling the hay, he'd be driving tractors, he'd be stripping engines down. He liked to get his hands dirty, he liked to figure out how things work, and he did that for about 3 years, Darren did. He got no education at all. But what we should have done with Darren is took him out of school and let him do that sort of stuff and do his lessons as well, but learn him about farming, about engines. You know, a few years later, Darren got his own garage. He was a mechanic. He was stripping cars. He was fixing engines. He did his own business. He's got a lovely family, a big house in Ashfield. His kids have gone on to university. But Darren did that for himself. He really didn't have a role model, really. He decided at 12, 13 that he wasn't going to school. He was going to mess about with engines, get a job, earn a few quid each week, and it worked for him. So there are thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of people like Darren across our country, and we've got to get hold of these young men and show them that there is a way. You don't have to stand on the street corner with your hoodie on selling 10 bags if you're good with your hands. Because I'm a strong believer that every young person in this country is good at something. And it's our job as politicians, as teachers, as trainers, as a society to find out what that young person is good at and then give them a chance. Not every single person is going to succeed, but a lot will, and it'll break that poverty cycle. And you know what, guess what? White working class boys, I've been one. I've been a single parent of 2 boys for 17 years. And white working class boys are pretty useful to this country when it comes to going down coal mines, when it comes to fishing in the North Sea, when it comes to working on building sites, in power stations. And you know what? When we have a world war, who do we send? We send these white working class lads to get slaughtered on battlefields. And you know, in peacetime, what do? When they put a flag up, we call them all racist, don't we? It's absolutely shocking how we treat our young lads in this country. But it says it's shocking, and I hope, you know, I've seen a lot of young men here today, and it fills me with hope. It really does, because they are our future. But we have a massive responsibility as politicians, as party members, to make sure that our young men get the best start in life. Give them the education, give them the training, give them the tools to succeed, because nobody wants to be on the corner of the street selling drugs. They want a good life, they want that nice car, they want that nice house, they want to have a nice family, go on holidays and do the right thing. That's me done. I'll shut up now because I've been going on for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Lee. Brilliant. We've basically touched on everything there. Education, system, family. It's about ideas, but I want to go now to you guys. Questions, please. These are not party political broadcasts. If you go on for more than 20 seconds, you're out. Where are the mics? Who's got the mics? Grace down here. Let's start there. Big fellow with his arm up. Let's take 2 at a time. Yeah.
Hi there, Peter D. Williams, Director of the Family Education Trust. One of the reform policies, of course, is to repeal the Online Safety Act. Not reform the Online Safety Act, repeal it. And of course, the effect of that would be to remove the protections of children being exposed to the pornography, which Miriam rightly pointed out have been exposed to for far too long. Up to my question is to Lee or to anyone on the panel, what would reform do about that if they're going to repeal the Online Safety Act? And what to the rest of the panel, what should they do? And what should we do to end that scourge?
Lee, I'll give that to you. Online.
Yeah, the Online Safety Act will not protect children, full stop. I don't believe it will. Children, I bet the average child in this country is far smarter than anybody in this audience on the internet. They can use these VPNs. If they want to access something, they can access it. I'd sooner go for the tech firms on this than legislate. Make it, you know, the punishments currently. I've had my own problems with Google. I had to go to the High Court over Google. They literally get away with these high-tech firms doing with whatever they want. I think if the consequences are so high for these high-tech firms and what people are seeing online, then they might start and change the tune. But I don't think the legislation as it stands, the Online Safety Act, it will not protect children at all. They'll just get around it. They're smart cookies, these kids are. The whole act and the bill at the time it's been a complete waste of time, a complete waste of government time, a complete waste of everybody's time, because it won't stop anything. Simple as. Okay,
right, I'm going to take from Miriam on this, because there might be an opposed view.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the Online Safety Act actually does. And of course it isn't perfect. It should have been drafted more tightly around pornography. That's absolutely true. But I think the kind of free speech threats that we are facing as a country predated the Online Safety Act. Nobody's been arrested under the Online Safety Act. They've been arrested under things like the Communications Act and things like that, which definitely need looking at. But having said that, the Online Safety Act is not perfect, but I disagree with Lee. There has already been a massive decrease in traffic to pornography sites in the UK. There was a spike in VPN downloading, but that has completely dropped off now. Those sites are no longer in the top visited ones. And the Online Safety Act was never going to stop all children accessing pornography, just like the rule that you can't buy alcohol till 18 doesn't stop all children buying alcohol or smoking at 16. The point is we want to stop children coming across pornography accidentally, because that's what the research shows gets them hooked. And why shouldn't we have age verification online like we do in the shops? Why should you be able to see pornography online without proving your age, when to see pornography in a DVD shop, yes, they still exist, you have to prove your age? So I think the principle behind it is a really good one and a really sound one that all civilizations can get behind. How we do it and how we make it work, of course, is going to be difficult. This is a first draft. But I do think it needs to be reformed and not repealed, because if it's repealed, there is absolutely nothing stopping a 12-year-old from going on Twitter and watching hardcore porn. And that is just really bad for all of us, and it's certainly bad for our young men.
Thanks, Miriam. Isabel's got a story.
I know, so it's just a little illustration of how smart kids are, and whatever we do on this front as reform, we need to be well advised by young people themselves. So in my daughter's school in the Middle East, they've brought in a new policy on mobile phones, which is great. I don't want to see mobile phones in the classroom. I can't believe they're allowed in any schools. And everyone was asked to buy these high-tech mobile phone pouches. And they've got some kind of magnetic thing where when you walk into school, the little pouch locks, so you can't access the phone all day. And at the end of the school day, you queue up and you go past a little beepy thing, and it unlocks. Well, this whole thing disintegrated within a matter of hours after the kids worked out very quickly that all you needed to do is put a burner phone in the pouch and have your real smartphone in your bag, or simply break the lock. And I think it just shows that all the best schemes that are thought up by clever adults sitting around tables are very, very quickly foiled by kids that are way, way ahead of their parents on this stuff. I mean, I find I defer to my 18-year-old son as to what the girls, the younger ones, should or shouldn't be looking at, apart from the obvious, because the kids are way ahead of us on this. So whatever we do, we must make sure we have very young advisors.
Thank you. Right, questions I'm going to go at the back there with the blue tie on. Is it blue? I'm not sure the right colour. Go for it.
Yeah. Thank you. So it got brought up earlier about suicide rates in men. And I was just wondering, it seems now like we have a double narrative with suicide, where for some people, as Parliament have put through, it's going to be acceptable to have an assisted suicide, whereas on the other hand, we're trying to lower the rates of suicide for men. And I just wonder, I guess my question is twofold. Is it possible to have a double narrative where we do see suicide rates reduce on one hand and not the other? And also, how would reform, what's their suicide prevention strategy, essentially? Will there be one?
Okay, that's Miriam. You've been kind of quite strong on the bill.
I can't answer for reform, but no, it's not possible. All the countries that we've seen that have implemented assisted suicide have seen an increase in what you might call the natural suicide rate. And I think, for a long time we've known that suicide is contagious. That's why newspapers are not allowed to report the method of suicide, because we know that it's catching, it gives people ideas. And so it's completely obvious that if the state says, actually it's okay to kill yourself, even if it's in limited circumstances, then that normalisation spreads throughout society. So no, it's not possible at all, and that's why, for many reasons, I absolutely oppose this assisted suicide bill. But I think it is really important to focus in on why young men particularly are so vulnerable to this. And I think some of the things that Lee was saying about purpose and joblessness and not having a future set out for you is a big part of that. So whether or not this bill succeeds, there's an awful lot we can do to help young men.
Very good. Let's keep going on the questions. Let's go at the back in the middle there. I'm basically pointing wherever. Grace, you choose.
Bill Belkin, I'm a journalist at the Standard, but I'm also writing a book about young conservatives. It's a really great panel, by the way, on a very important subject, but I think one issue that hasn't been addressed is religion. And there was quite a stark YouGov study a couple of weeks ago that showed the last half a decade belief in God has quadrupled to nearly 50%, and church attendance has also risen 3 times to nearly 20%. And anecdotally, I go to church in London, the Catholic Church, and you see a lot of young men there. So if reform are going to tackle the education system or prisons, but also address things like the scourge of pornography, disproportionality of crime among young men, surely religion also has to play a key part in that, and reform needs to champion that.
Felt like a statement about religion. Lee, any comment on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, if anybody watched Nigel's speech today, he talked about this. We are a Christian country. I just want to come back to this gentleman here, just slightly on the suicide. Suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 50 in this country. Today, between 12 and 15 men under the age of 50 will take their own lives is it's an epidemic. But going on to your point about religion, yes, you can't force religion on people. You know, they've either got the faith or they haven't. I mean, I don't have the faith. I know Miriam's got the faith. I wished I'd got the faith. I'm looking for signs all the time. I'm hoping he's here today somewhere. He's gonna drag me in. But I will say this: I think I live a pretty decent life. I probably live. I'm not perfect by any means, but the faith people have got in this country and why people are suddenly going to church now, it's increasing. I think people in this country feel threatened. I think they feel threatened by other religions, by what's happened in this country, while the demographics have changed so much. And for me, it's a little bit like when people are putting flags up on the lampposts. People are scared. They're trying to protect their own identity. And they're saying to politicians, look, we've had enough, we're scared. I understand why people are going to church now. They like think, well, what's happened to this country? We used to live a traditional British way of life. That's changing. And I think church is one of them ways that people get, sort of get it off their chest and say to the state, look, we are a Christian country. And I don't mind leading a Christian life. I think it's a good life, but I can't say I'm a believer, but I understand why people go and have that faith.
Thank you, Lee. Let's just go back. Oh, yeah, you go where you want.
Hi, Jessica Hill, FE Week. I recently interviewed someone who was on the panel for the Curriculum and Assessment Review, which is a massive review of the curriculum and assessment system in England. And they were saying what surprised them most about the consultation feedback they got from that review was just how many young people told them they wanted more diversity in the curriculum. And they're about to announce their recommendations to the government. And I strongly suspect that they're going to tell the government they should boost diversity in the curriculum. So I'm interested to hear whether you think if this government does go ahead with those recommendations, if that is the case, and they increase diversity in the curriculum.
What do you mean by diversity in the curriculum? Do you mean
kind of the opposite of what reformers set out in their policy document?
But in terms of the subjects that are looked at, or the people that are teaching, or
yeah. So rather than just teaching British history, they feel there should be more teaching the history of other cultures and that kind of thing.
Well, we should certainly teach more about Yorkshire. Let's do that. But Lee, you start on this.
Yeah, I think I know what you're getting onto. I think there are some teachers, and whether you like it or not, there are some teachers in our schools are brainwashing our kids into their way of thinking. And it's true. And when we get into power, we will root these teachers out and hold them to account. They need to stop it. What they should be doing is teaching these children about the Industrial Revolution, teaching about the First World War, the Second World War, teaching about the history of medicine in this country and that sort of stuff, and champion our history, our heritage and our culture and our way of life, our democracy. I said today this country is a gift to the world. Let's celebrate that. And this diversity nonsense what I keep hearing, and it is nonsense. Let's remember that we are Great Britain, and let's teach our kids British values. That's it.
I hate it when Lee sits on the fence. Oh, it's a nightmare, panellist. Right, let's go back here. Come on, let's go up here. We've got time for one more. Oh no, let's go. Sorry, she's had her hand up. Sorry, big fella. I know that's a fetching delay, but I'm going to go back there.
Hi, so as a young woman who intends to one day hopefully get married and have a family, obviously it's extremely important to me that young men can be successful. But I'm particularly interested in what Miriam was saying about pornography. And I've also been a victim of sexual assault and rape. And I'm wondering whether the panel has any thoughts on, pornography, violent porn doesn't stop affecting men when they turn 18. Why can't we just ban it outright? I don't think it's the case that young men are bad or evil, but they're influenced by something very dangerous that's more and more prevalent.
Okay, thank you for that question. Miriam?
Well, yes, I agree with you. And I think there's been this narrative that's emerged over the last few years that Britain has this tradition of complete libertarianism when it comes to distributing pornographic material. The opposite is true. We have had in Britain some of the strictest laws on obscenity of anywhere in the world, and actually it was illegal to distribute hardcore pornography in this country until the late 20th century. Yes, we have freedom of speech in this country, but that is completely different from being allowed to distribute material that, let's be honest, corrupts society. And I think there's been this tendency on the right to think that porn is a private matter, but it's not, because the cultural impact of men being brought up to think that violence is normal in sex is huge, not just for men, but for women too. So I agree with you. I don't think there's any justification for pornographic material because it's always harmful to women and almost always harmful to men. But I think the difficulty we've got on the right of politics is the Americanization of the kind of freedom of speech lobby, which has lumped together imagery and violence with genuine concerns about freedom of speech. And I think what we need to do is separate those two concerns again. Yes, you should be able to say anything you want that offends anybody, that's fine. But distributing material that glamorizes violence and sexual abuse is wrong, and it's corrupting to our society. And our ancestors knew that. What our civilization was built on knew that, and I think we need to remember that again. But I think what we need to think about is, at the moment, the kind of anti-porn lobby is a feminist leftist movement, and I will support them all the way. But actually, we need the anti-porn lobby to come from men as well. And there's a fantastic young man, British man, called Alex Slater, who's now moved to America, who set up an app to help young men break their addiction to pornography. And he's made millions out of it, by the way, and he's driving a Lamborghini. But young men are starting to mobilize and realizing that the impact this is having on their lives and their relationships, and that's really, really exciting. So I think that it's a collective effort. Yes, we need law, but we also need young men to recognize the impact this is having on them and fight back against it.
Thanks, Miriam. Isabel.
I just want to give a slightly different complexion to this discussion. I am slightly concerned almost at an over-focus on pornography in this context, because I think it's kind of painting our young men as if they're all a bunch of porn obsessives. And of course some of them are, and of course violent porn is grotesque, and we should do everything we can to stop it. But I actually think there's a flip side to this, that if we keep characterizing boys as kind of continually gobbling up this vile material, we forget the other side, which is that the Me Too movement has actually been, in many ways, very corrosive for young men, making them quite frightened and uncertain about how to conduct normal, healthy relationships. And I think that is a real worry, for young men today, fearing that they are going to be Me Too'd at every step of the way in ways that, my generation didn't worry about. You just carried on as normal and in a healthy and respectful fashion. So, of course, we should be addressing the issue with the explosion of easy access to pornography, but let's not also demonize our young boys as if this is all they're doing. Many of them actually want to have normal relationships with girls and are actually afraid about how to go about that.
Okay, thank you. Miriam is very...
I completely agree. We should not demonise boys. What I'm trying to say is we should see them as the victims. A 12-year-old boy whose first sexual experience is watching a video of rape is a victim. And that's what so I completely agree with you. But we should not demonise boys. We should protect them from this rather than just assuming that they will see this as normal.
I don't even know what porn is, to be honest. Okay. I'm going to have to call time at the bar. What a fantastic discussion. Genuinely, thank you for coming. This is a critical issue. It's a critical issue for this nation. CSJ has founded that work is the best route out of poverty, that we have to get more of our lads across this country believing in themselves with the purpose of a job, with a role model and all the rest, and that's been brought up today. Thank you to our fantastic panel, and thanks for coming. Cheers.